Aloha, my friends and family. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Embodied Healing Self. So, this week I have a very beautiful guest with me, Amanda. She is a breast implant advocate or illness survivor advocate. Whatever, I don't know what the right words are. She is an advocate for holistic wellness, and she's also created some non-toxic beauty care products that she shares with people. She has a breast implant illness team that I can't wait to hear about. And she's just here to join me in a conversation that not a lot of people are willing to talk about. And so I'm super grateful for this opportunity. My community knows that we talk about, there are certain things that are really hard conversations to have. And it includes things like money and politics and food and sex and religion. And I think we can kind of put this one on that list of things that are difficult to talk about too, but also look past it and just realizing like this is a really important conversation to have and it needs to be heard. And so I'm grateful. Thank you for your willingness to be here today, Amanda, and share this time with me.
Thank you, Jen. You're beautiful. Thank you for the opportunity for me to speak to your listeners.
Well, thank you. So you're joining me from California, right? Is that Southern California?
Los
and I'm in Florida.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah. No, I'm right in Los Angeles. It's very interesting here, to say the least.
We're kind of in different places, I guess, not only just in the concept of just where we are in the country, but just with things that are happening right now. So when you think about your big why and your mission and where you are in your life right now, you've had quite the journey to get here.
Yeah.
And you know that your journey has brought you to this moment so that you can share your story and give permission. I want to say, like, give permission to people who are kind of noticing that they're in a place in their life, but they haven't been given permission, or they haven't heard the conversation, or they don't have the tools to even know what next step to take.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the work that you're doing, and you have a whole team that you're working with, I mean, you're being published in a lot of different areas with your team. You're supporting so many women. And this is part of that process, is just getting that message out and giving permission to the idea that there may be an invitation for change for some of us. And that's a really strong message. Yeah. And I want to invite you into this conversation by just sharing, first of all, in this moment, what are you most passionate about? And then sharing how that journey began. So in this moment, for my listeners who are just hearing you for the first time, what are you most passionate about in your life at this moment?
I'm most passionate in my life, and I've always been this way, actually, is about protecting and caring for others. In fact, my favorite saying, do unto others, I've said since I was a little girl. I've also said since I was, I don't know, maybe 6, 7, 8 years old, I'm here for something really important when I grow up. Not knowing what that was, of course. And I just laugh because other light workers I know have said the same thing. They always knew when they were younger that they were here on earth for something important. And the time is now.
Yeah, the time is now. So what changed in your life? Like, where were you and what were you doing? What was Amanda like before things began to shift?
So Amanda, I love speaking the third part. I would say, and another thing I would say when I was younger, because life hasn't been particularly easy for me. I feel like I had a lot of life lessons in the first half of my life. Another thing I said when I was little was, I feel like the first half of my life is going to be really difficult, but the last half is going to be amazing. I mean, what little kid says stuff like that, right? I've always been very lucky. My mom always says, "You're the unluckiest, luckiest person I know." And I think that's true. Um, I've always, though, acknowledged and felt that I have been given so much in this life. I've never wanted for anything. I've been very privileged. I was born and raised in Hillsborough, California for most of my life. And we moved to Seattle when I was in high school. But my father was a doctor. And when I was 7.5, he died unexpectedly. He was older than my mom, but it was really shocking to us. I don't think anybody can ever be prepared. I remember kissing him goodbye on his way to work that morning, like I often did. I'd jump up on his truck and, kiss him through the window. And my parents were on their way to Big Sur for the weekend. And the next thing I remembered, my mom went to meet him at the hospital. And I just remember at about 5, 6 p.m., her being dropped off in a cab with her two best friends, one who happened to be my kindergarten teacher, and without my dad, and her coming in and saying, your dad died this afternoon. And that shifts and shapes everything in your life. She met my stepfather pretty soon after that. And so I did have a stepfather in my life. But he wasn't equipped for taking that on either. And I really commend him now, because that's a hero to me, somebody who will come in and take over. But he didn't ever really want to be a dad. And so it was hard. Our love language was different. His love language was, gifts and so forth. And that's how he showed me his love. And I just, wanted a hug. I just wanted someone to take me to a movie. So that created a lot of angst. So I would say that, if anything, that lack of a father in my life created a lot of pain for me, which in my teen years created a very rebellious young woman. But I've always thought for myself. I've always been extremely strong and outspoken. If you ask my parents, or my whole family, extended family, they love me because, I'm so compassionate and I care about others. But at the same time, nobody can control me. Nobody can, put me in a box. And that did cause issues, with my stepfather. But so I would say before that, I had already started in high school, drinking, partying with my friends, and it was a form of escapism. And I never dealt with the hard stuff. I wasn't ready. So I would say that the woman who got implants in her early 20s, just was lost. Yeah. And I'm finding myself now in my 40s. But it's been,
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think that's, it's important to remember and relate to all that you shared around like the underlying needs that we have and how we respond to them and the decisions that we make. And I believe it's important that as we move forward and we're talking about breast implant illness today, not looking back like it was a mistake or having regret, but and learning and growing from it and just having compassion for the version of you that was 22 years old or however old you were, and
right. Yeah.
And made a decision based on where she was, and because we're always doing the best that we can do.
100%.
Yeah. So we're at that time, because now you're really in the world of health coaching and holistic beauty care, non-toxic living, breast implant illness. What were you doing through your 20s and 30s until you realized something needed to change?
Sure. So, and let me say, my mother is extremely natural. She's cooked every meal for us. My father was Italian, but even after he passed, she married an Englishman. And so my mom's amazing. I have a Cancer moon. And oftentimes when you have a Cancer moon, not only is that where the compassion comes from, but you often have a very close relationship with your mother.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother and I think, have been together in many lifetimes before this. And so she cooks, she shows her love through many different ways, but cooking is one of them. And so I ate beautifully, and we're very natural. You know, I remember growing up, we had a weekend home in Santa Cruz, and just, you know, having that great life of growing up on the beach. And my mom was always adamant that we take our supplements and vitamins, keeping us around the house. I've never worn makeup in my life. I was a dancer growing up. I played varsity soccer for 5 years. I love athletics. I love being physical. So, you know, we were always out and about outside playing growing up. We lived in the wine country for a while. And so, you know, like, so I'll say, so after my father passed, when I got into my teens and we start developing, I noticed that, you know, yes, I'm tall and thin, but my breasts didn't completely develop. And we now know that's something called tuberous breast deformity. There are two deformities that women have. Poland syndrome is another one. I didn't have a lot of breast tissue, but it's like they start developing, but they didn't really develop. And so it was very mild. Nobody would even have noticed. But I think what it did for me, because I knew something was wrong, I already had a little bit of OCD growing up, and it made me just really like hone in on that. And I'm a Scorpio, so we kind of tend to pick ourselves apart anyway. And so I wanted to just be like every other girl, you know. And when I got into my 20s, not having dealt with maybe some of the things like my father's death. I had a terrible car accident in 2001 that I think made me very vulnerable. I wanted to do something about it. So I elected just to have a surgery, a breast lift, to try to correct it and make it look normal. There wasn't a lot of tissue to work with though. So, and I might not have chosen the right surgeon. So he did it and I didn't really notice a difference. So then of course they say, well, we can use a breast implant that will push out the tissue. It will give you a nice shape. And I just remember thinking, oh, like disappointed, like, oh, why didn't this work? That's not where I wanted to go. Like, I can't even see myself with something inside me. I envision myself being in the shower, and what would it be to look down and see two breast implants? And it's interesting because, you know, when I'm dealing with patients now, I hear it so much every day. Oh, this was always my dream to have breast implants. And it's just different. And that's okay. That was their dream. And here I'm the opposite. I'm like, oh gosh, I did not want to have them at all. But in my quest to be normal, and I wanted to date men, and in my 20s, I thought I need to do this. So I did. I chose a very conservative plastic surgeon who was affiliated with the university close to where I lived. I thought I was making a great decision. Another girlfriend had gone to her. And at this point, a lot of girlfriends had breast implants already. So it wasn't like it was completely foreign to me. I had them done because I was thin and my skin hadn't been stretched out before. I was disappointed when I woke up and she said, you know, I could only put a small implant in you. And I don't even remember the CCs, 210, 220, something small. Most thin women have a wide sternum, so you have that gap in your cleavage. And just aesthetically, it wasn't what I wanted. And I got capsular contracture in one of them immediately.
What is
So
that?
capsular contracture, I'm just going to put it in layman's terms, just
Mhm.
for people. One of the implants can get harder, and it is a scale. So it can be mild to really hard, I guess is the best way to put it. And it's uncomfortable. It needs to be replaced generally. Sometimes a doctor can prescribe a medication that can sometimes soften it. Sometimes it softens on its own, but it didn't in my case. So I had to get them replaced a year later. And when I went back to replace them, the surgeon that I had gone to, she was on maternity leave, so I had to find a new one. Asked my friends, my girlfriend had just had hers replaced, and I liked the way hers looked. And this surgeon was, he worked closely with pharmaceutical companies doing studies and so forth. So again, I'm thinking, well, that's a great choice, right? But then he said, when he looked at me, I think you need to put silicone implants in. Well, this was 2004. The important part to remember is this was the time that silicone implants had been banned from the market, because a lot of women were getting sick and they were focused on ruptures. Apparently a lot of women, I was too young to even remember this and it wouldn't have been on my radar. Apparently a lot of women were getting ruptures and silicone was getting into their bodies and they were getting sick. What I know now as an advocate is they weren't all getting ruptures. They had what I ended up having, breast implant illness. But the name has changed over the years. They've really done a great job at kind of hiding this from the public. So not enough people knew. So when he said, no, these are the new and improved back on the market. In fact, they're not even available yet for everyone. We're going to do a study. You can be part of it. So we'll track your symptoms and make sure that everything's good. But, I was a little weary because I just said, but isn't silicone bad for you? But he convinced me that no, and I didn't know enough. And I wouldn't have probably done the research at that age. I got the replacement silicone. I did not get a capsular contracture again. And I didn't even notice, but I would say 9 months to a year later, I did start developing hormonal issues, which I wasn't even tying back to the implants. They also never included me in the study, which I would later find out happened to many women because those women follow me now and we've shared stories. And there was no study. So had they done what they said, they would have figured out that first year that I was having issues. I might have even explanted immediately. Who knows?
So 9 months to a year, that's pretty quick.
Yeah.
What were the symptoms that you were experiencing?
Specifically night sweats, insomnia, especially right before my period, which I figured out is called premenstrual insomnia. I had got a ruptured ovarian cyst that was terrible. And unfortunately, because I went to the ER, because I wasn't sure what was going on, it was worsened by the fact they gave me such heavy duty pain medication, and I had an empty stomach, which then created a whole snowball effect of,
Gut issues.
nausea. It was terrible. I ended up in the hospital for 3 days. And then inflammation kind of started coming and going, but it was not a lot yet. It was like maybe 5 to 10 pounds. So while I thought it was strange, since I've just pretty thin and never been able to gain weight, they say, oh, as you get older, you start gaining weight. So I just thought, and when I went to the best gynecologist in town and did share what was going on, and they said, oh, that's okay, that's your normal. And I said, no, it's not normal. And that's why I'm here. These are like perimenopausal symptoms. So I was.
How old were you?
That would have been like, a year after implants. So however old I was in 2004, like 26 or something.
Yeah, so that would be very early perimenopausal symptoms.
Totally.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation. My background in holistic health coaching was through a functional medicine approach. And so that approach was very much like the scales are not the same for everybody, right? Like whatever measurements we're using to measure thyroid's like a really big one. It's really more symptom based and sort of like your bio individuality and your epigenetics and things like that. It's a more symptom based. So what I'm hearing you say is at 26 years old, you started experiencing symptoms like night sweats and all kinds of other symptoms that threw your hormones out of balance. Yes. How long did this? So, and I'm also hearing like you were raised in a family where you had values around food. It sounds like your mom cooked meals. It's not like you were eating McDonald's every night.
Never. So we weren't allowed to.
Yeah. So you had these values already around health and wellness.
Yes.
And then you're having this experience where all of a sudden you start noticing things are not really, it just doesn't feel aligned for you. How long did this go on for?
And
Until, and did it continue to escalate, or and were you being supported in treatments holistically, or like how long did it go on for until you decided to shift something?
right. No, and it's too, I wouldn't have been necessarily, even though I had a natural upbringing and all of that, and my values were such. And I do remember now too, my mom taking my brother, who they were saying had ADD. He's a few years younger than me. And I remember her saying, we will not be putting him on any medication, and trying to look for holistic avenues way back before that was even the thing. And they said, we think we should microdose marijuana for him. And he was
Mm.
only, like 10 years old or however old. And I remember my mom thinking, oh, I don't know if I want my child doing that either. But so my mom is very ahead of her time, we'll put it that way. But I wasn't there yet. Like
Well,
I,
how divine too, right? Of course
yeah,
she is, because
of
she's
course.
holding the space for your journey.
My mom's amazing.
Yeah.
So I wasn't there yet. I was still kind of more Western medicine and thinking like it's much easier to just take a pill for things. I think I was too, for a time, I don't even remember what years, on the birth control pill, because I was also getting horrific cramps from the
Mm.
implants. I'd be in fetal position. So then they prescribe you naproxen for the cramps, which, hey, it works like a charm. But what it does to your gut is just unreal. So, right, I was more about what I see happening in our society now. It's an epidemic, is we want the quick fix, we want the instant gratification. I was doing that. That was where I was at the time.
Mm.
So I
You know,
hadn't explored holistic medicine yet.
I feel like there's a deeper awareness around this that is, it's going to be difficult for people to hear as I share this, but I feel like, and from my experiences and working through integrative wellness for many, many years, is sometimes there's also a part of us that, um, we, if we just do what people tell us to, then we don't have to take radical self-responsibility when things don't go well. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like that, like, oh, you're here, just take this pill and it'll fix this. Well, I'm just going to do what they say, because if that's what they're telling me to do, and that's their job. But then the unfortunate part of that is that when it disrupts your well-being in your body, the person who has to live with it is you. And
Absolutely.
that's the most heartbreaking part, is we, and everybody's doing the best they can, but we're getting advice. They're giving us advice based on what they know, because that's their job. And it's like pediatricians easily giving antibiotics away, right? It's like, because it makes parents happy, because then now they have an answer and they have a fix.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be that quick fix all the time.
Absolutely. And
And
my mom, was great about that. We rarely took antibiotics. Another thing, because I just said, right, that I was having an issue with sleeping, they prescribed me Ambien. I immediately thought this seems like a really scary drug. I mean, and I'm so glad I only took it for a few months. So now I'm on naproxen, Ambien. I think for a time I was on the pill, right? Because I was trying to help my menstrual cramps. All of these drugs are horrific. And to think that like you're on all of them. Oh, and because of my car accident, I got hit
mm,
60 miles an hour from behind. I had never even filled my prescription for pain medication, because that was never even on my radar until my boyfriend at the time said, you should fill that. And so I said, oh, really? Will that help? I mean, I truly was in a lot of pain, but I was in a lot of pain emotionally. Let's be
yes,
honest.
that's
Okay.
the, and as I hear you sharing this, it from my perspective, as I'm hearing your story, what I notice that many of us do is, like, we become very disconnected from our body and what
Mhm.
it needs.
Yes.
And so, and the more things that we take to sort of put the band-aid on and fix it, the more disconnected we become, because there's a frequency to all of these things,
Mhm.
and it numbs the pain temporarily, but it's not really getting to the root cause. And so the very thing that we're doing is taking us further from the thing that we need, which is
Yes.
to really slow down and listen to our body and be like, what does my body need? Like, and asking the question. So I'm noticing, and I'm wondering if you had this moment,
Mhm.
and this is for the listeners, like I'm noticing, and I'm thinking back, when I was practicing more health coaching, and remembering a client of mine who had breast implants, and about the same time, probably like 9 months later, all these health issues started showing up and her hair started falling out, and then she had thyroid dysfunction. And I just remember asking the question, like, was there anything that changed
Mhm.
in the last 6 to 9 months? And she said no. Like, in her mind, she didn't think that that was a big deal, or
Right.
didn't think that that could possibly be what. Let's just start with surgery, no matter what kind, is a big deal. Okay. This is
100%.
no matter what kind. And then putting something in your body, again, you know, your body has to, well, you hope that your body doesn't have an allergic reaction to it, right? Like, because then all the systems just start to shut down. But
Yes.
just being aware of, like, what do I notice is happening in my body?
Mhm.
And when did this start happening? So, what was that? Give us some insight on what that was like for you. When did you finally realize, like, oh, I have breast implant illness and now I'm going to change my life?
Oh gosh, well, that wasn't for a while. It was a 7-year journey, which I
I
think is
love how you keep saying 7 years, by the way. You were 7 when your father passed away, and then the 7-year journey. And then with the women you work with now, this is like a message I'm receiving. They usually come around 7 years that they start noticing it. So go ahead, keep sharing.
that is interesting that you say that. And we have to listen to all of this. So it started with the hormonal. Then I remember having digestive issues. Like no matter what I ate, I had stomach upset. Now speaking to women, it doesn't matter if they think they have symptoms or don't. I have not met a woman yet with breast implants that doesn't have digestive issues. And it
Mm,
can be bloating, it can be a whole host of things, but they always have something. And they'll even say that, like, oh yeah, I do have digestive issues. We couldn't figure it out. While again, because I was thin and could eat whatever I wanted, I didn't, when I got out on my own, make the best choices because I didn't get I love food and I love really good quality food because of my mom. But because I was always working out after, going to the gym after work each day, I didn't cook for myself. And now I'm cooking more on my own and I love it. So I noticed a digestive. And so it wasn't anything that really stood out. I just remember the inflammation. And it wasn't until, so it's 7 years into the breast implants, I had another fender bender. A gentleman hit me from behind again, but it wasn't a big deal. It was at the end of an off ramp. So it could only have been like maybe 10 miles an hour. But the cascade of inflammation that created in my body, it was as if I got hit by a Mack truck. I say it all the time. And now I hear it with all of our patients. They'll say, I know you won't believe this, but my body, I feel like I was saying, like, it's like you're a retired football player. Okay, that makes zero sense when I hear like workout every day. I'm a dancer background. But what I also notice with Western medicine, they love to blame everything on something else. So it was
mhm.
all too easy to blame what I was experiencing, the pain, with my 2001 car accident.
Oh, yeah.
And that made sense to me, right? So I'm going to the chiropractor, I'm going to physical therapy, I'm going to the spine doctor, I'm going for massage each week, which is a lot. And I'm like so sensitive. I don't even want anyone to touch me. The inflammation is that bad where, it's like that parasympathetic, is it parasympathetic
Hmm.
response?
Yep.
So that then triggered something. I even went to my breast surgeon. Isn't that wild? Like intuitively, although I believe that the breast implants really do block you, when you have surgery, like you mentioned, your meridians, when they're cut, it throws off everything. But I can say that I do believe that the implants block your heart chakra.
Mm.
So to a point, like it was like I was living, but I was like kind of zombie-like, I feel like I wasn't really aware. I wasn't able to embrace or, my intuition. And I'm very intuitive. So, but I would have these little things of like, I should go to the plastic surgeon, just have him look at my implants because of this accident. And he's like, nope, everything looks great. Nothing ruptured. You're good. I'd say, okay, but isn't that interesting that like
Well,
something.
from my perspective, what's so interesting is I see a lot of this as learning to trust yourself. And so you did trust yourself in going to your doctor, but maybe it was really about realizing that you needed to trust yourself again, right? And as I hear you share the story, and I hear you say, I just love everything that you're saying because I'm watching the story unfold as you're sharing it. But I think there's a lot of power in words. And when I heard you say, like, it felt like I got hit by the Mack truck, right?
Mm, mm,
And just before we hopped on this call, I'm seeing like this whole thing, like, yeah, I was eating healthy and but I was doing this and that and that. And you were doing all the things, like many of us are doing the things that we
mm.
think that are cultural norms that keep us, surviving. But then God, universe, source has other plans. Is like, no, honey, you're not living in alignment with basically the frequency or the vibration of your soul. We talked about this before we got on. A lot of times, and there have been a couple guests on the show that have had this conversation, and my community knows I had a near-death experience. Imagine for the listeners, if we're energetic beings and we vibrate at a certain frequency, and all of a sudden we're making choices in our life. So let's imagine that we come into this earth vibrating at a certain frequency, like the frequency of our higher self or our
Yes.
highest expression, our divine blueprint.
Mhm.
And we go through life and things are hard. We lose loved ones, we drink alcohol, we all these things start to lower our vibration.
Yes.
And it just keeps getting lower and lower, and we're more and more misaligned, and
Mhm.
we become really uncomfortable, but we become disconnected from our body. So we're not actually listening to our intuition or our body that's speaking to us. And then all of a sudden, every once in a while, some of us get hit by that Mack truck. And the
Mhm.
Mack truck is like that spiritual awakening, that soul upgrade that's like, hello, are you ready to live in alignment with your higher self now? Like,
Right.
how long are you going to wait? And it sounds like in
Yes.
your story that was you. And when I hear stories like that, it's like, oh, okay, well, I mean, thank God, because now you're here to teach. Now
Yes.
you're ready to step into the teacher, right?
Yes, absolutely. Because, like I always say, I was a dancer. I didn't have any huge aspirations like, oh, I'm going to do, be a CEO or anything. I was just happy and content thinking I'll be a dancer. I always knew I wanted to help others. But then, too, I'll say, but I had also started working in plastic surgery at this time because in my mind, I thought, well, I would love to help other women feel wonderful since I had the deformity. Not like let's put implants in everyone, just like how can, and my favorite procedures today include like Mohs repair, which is repair after a skin cancer on the face, traumatic accidents, like more the reconstructive, because that's really ultimately changing someone's life. And I think that we always think like, oh, or some do, plastic surgery, superficial. But I mean, that's not what I gravitated towards. I gravitated towards the procedures that really made an impact, like it had for
Mm.
me. So then, too, now I'm really drinking the Kool-Aid, right? I'm dating somebody too who is very like low vibe. I mean, I care about him still to this day, but he was, anyway, that's a whole nother conversation. But so then I'm starting Botox
Mm.
in my late 20s because again, my mom was natural. She's never done any of that. I would have never done any of it. That wasn't on my radar either because I've never even worn makeup. But the plastic surgeon I was working for, a female facial plastic surgeon, I remember her saying to me pretty soon after I started working for her, oh, you could use some Botox in your forehead. I didn't need it. I didn't have I mean, look at my forehead now. I don't have any Botox in it. I did do it for years. I didn't need it at 28. but she made me insecure. And I'm here working in plastic surgeries. So I said, okay. So then I kind of started into all of that, which is another toxin. So I was full on drinking the Kool-Aid. I'll say that.
So what I love about your story is that, it's those moments and those choices that we look back and we're like, who was that? They gave us clarity about what we don't want.
Right.
And they help us to be super clear about who we're becoming versus who we were when we made those decisions, because who we are becoming is more important than who we were when we made those decisions.
Right.
But for the listeners, they want to connect with, they can relate to the choices that they've made.
Mhm.
And some of them listening right now, they may intuitively know, and they may not want to admit it, that it's possible that their autoimmunity and their gut issues and their thyroid issues and all of this stuff that started surfacing over the last 5 to 10 years. And of course, we can say, oh, it's because you're in your 40s or 50s. Well, yes, that happens too. But
Yeah.
are you on an accelerated path of autoimmunity or not? Right. I mean, it's not normal for every 45-year-old to be on prescription medication. I mean, I'm not. So,
No, I'm not.
but it's
Yeah.
kind of the norm now, right? It's like,
Mhm.
but so there might be somebody listening who's like, oh, maybe I am having an adverse reaction to this. No one is, what do I even do? Like, what do you do? Well, first of all, that's a major decision. Who even supports you in this process?
Right.
And what does the recovery look like?
Oh, and once you finally figure it out, well, so I'll just briefly tell you. So even going through this 2017, I was at my sickest. I do remember Crystal Hefner coming out in People magazine saying that her breast implants were making her sick. I looked at my boss at the time. I remember this exactly. I said, wow, she sounds just like me. Is that what's going on? Because now at this point, after that minor fender bender, now I have heart palpitations. I had 38 symptoms. Thyroid dysfunction, heart palpitations, shortness of breath. I couldn't even walk up a flight of stairs anymore. I gained up to 58 pounds of inflammation at one point. I was going from doctor to doctor to doctor because nobody was helping. Nobody had that answer. So I was like, feeling like I'm running out of time. I have to keep searching. They were brushing me off, dismissing me, telling me that I was just anxious. And I am prone to anxiety. It happened ever since my father passed. I've had an issue ever since. And I felt like nobody was helping me. No one was supporting me. I always say it's like I was in the ocean watching a cruise ship go by with all my friends, family, and doctors, and no one was throwing me that life preserver. And you just think, I feel like those 7 years were my dark night of the soul. And it's like the world was against me. Nothing was working out. Wasn't working out for me dating. I didn't like the boss I had, like nothing was working out. Friendships with girls who I had supported and loved all of these years. Now we're saying, oh, it's really no fun hanging out with you. You always are sick. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I've been I feel like a good person. Like, why is this happening? So in 2017 would have been my first opportunity to wake up. My boss said, that woman sounds crazy. There is no illness associated with breast implants.
Wow.
And that was an outright betrayal, not me now looking back, because he was 62 years old. He would have worked through the moratorium. He was more than aware. He's a primary breast surgeon. Of course he knows about BII. My bad. I should have looked into it anyway. But again, he was an authority figure who I thought, well, he's going to know more than anyone. So I brushed it off too. And it wasn't until 2019 when a friend sent me to a new woman for colonics. I had my own, but she wasn't available. So I went to a new one. And I didn't even get into, I'm sick. I just had pointed out, I've been dealing with something for a while. My lymph system is congested. You can see from my legs, they're normally very lean and they're very swollen with edema. And by the end of my session, again, I didn't know this woman. She said, I know why you're sick. And I said, you do? Because I've seen 67 doctors. She said, it's your breast implants. And she said, it's so matter of factly that when someone talks like that, you kind of believe them.
Yeah.
I was not totally there yet. I was in denial. I was in shock. I said, did you see what I do for a living? I've never had any women, because I'm forgetting about the Crystal Hefner thing. And she said, I've had 11 women who've laid right here on this table. They look and sound like you. And when they've removed their implants, they've gotten better. I was even to the point too, this is my ego. I was like, well, you don't understand. I have them because of a deformity.
Right.
So like, you're trying to take away something that I need, is kind of like, if I had to surmise it. So I left. I almost wonder if I would have even wanted to go back to her, because you don't, if you're not ready to hear it from someone, right? I get it now with what's going on in the world. Like I wasn't ready to hear the truth, right? The truth made me defensive. So I went home, but here was the difference. This was a week before Christmas and New Year's, December 2018. And I saw a sign every day after she said that. A guy friend of mine called the next day to wish me a happy new year. I said, I'm still not feeling well. He said, you sound just like my neighbor. Call her, which was so awesome on his part that he would even think to do that. I call a stranger. I share with her my symptoms. She said, it's your breast implants. I said, why are you saying this? She said, because it happened to me. And now I've had him out for 3 years. She was 36 years old. And it triggered in her what she said was, and I don't know now how she is, but early dementia. And she was on medication. And that really, really scared me. And I said, well, what should I do? Should I just replace them? Like, I'm even asking her, and I work in plastic surgery. She said, no, Amanda, do not replace them. And then I'm thinking, oh my God, am I going to go back to how I was? Because you can't even think straight. So then it was a big bulletin board, something that said France is banning implants, and or a particular kind of implant. Then, and this is so funny, I go for Botox the next week with a facial plastic surgeon I really like, because he's kind of silly and fun. And I'm hoping, totally hoping, like he's going to talk me out of it, right? So as he's preparing the Botox, I said, oh, you won't believe what they think is wrong now. They think my breast implants are making me sick, you know? And he, like I said, I made a point of saying he's so silly. He got so serious, and he came over and he looked me in the eye and he said, Amanda, if you think this is what's wrong, you need to get those out immediately. I've just had 6 patients of mine who've gone through that. And here he's never been serious. So I said, okay, I'll make the appointments. Being in Beverly Hills, the beauty capital, wouldn't they all be up on that? So I make appointments with 3 of the best breast surgeons, just like my old boss. This isn't real. These women are crazy. By now, though, I had been in the Facebook group that now has over 150,000 women. Every single one sounded like me. I feel like I'm dying. I have heart palpitations, blah, blah. My hair is falling out. My vision is going, all the things that I had. And I said, but wait a minute, I'm confused. I just was in a group with over 100,000 women. They all sound like me, and then they get better. So I'm going to go with what they say. And when that didn't work, then it was, oh, and we must replace them. We have to replace these because you'll be deformed. If not, you're not going to be happy. And I said, let me worry about what it's going to look like, because I can't feel like this anymore. So I went home. I felt like they were taking away that little bit of hope that I had. It's almost like I compare this, it's a horrible comparison, but it's like if you were kidnapped and you didn't see the light of day for 7 years, and then you see a crack in the window to escape. And you're like, I'm getting to that window and nothing's going to stop me. That's how I felt, because it started to resonate with me. So my awakening took those 7 years, but now I was really waking up. And I went home and I did something I'd never done before. Always believed in God. I've always tried to live my life as if God's always watching. I prayed. I remember in my place in Manhattan Beach, on my knees in my bedroom praying. I never prayed because too, I thought I'm going to save these prayers for when like a family member's sick or something. I don't want to ever ask for anything. I've been given so much. And I said, God, if you help me find the right surgeon who will remove these, I even bet they're going to look great. I'm putting all my faith in you. I mean, this was such a surrender moment for a girl who like, I am such a control freak, especially since my father passed. I was totally giving it up to God. And 2 days later, I Googled and another surgeon popped up, Dr. Kevin Brenner in Beverly Hills. And I thought, this is a sign. I don't know him, but I just feel right about this. And I went in and told him the same story. And I said, I feel like this is resonating with me. I need to take these out. And he said, so let's do that. I think you're right. I think we should take them out and leave them out this time. I said, let's do it. And I did 3 weeks later.
Well, thank you for sharing that with me. I was getting a little emotional listening to your story because I'm just, I'm hearing the part of you where you felt like something wasn't right. And yet everybody that you trusted in your life at that time was
Yeah.
contradicting what you felt was right for you. And it's almost like, what I want to ask you is, what, for the woman who needs to hear the right thing right now, what would you say to her?
It's a process. I don't expect anybody to rush to make this decision, nor should you. I think if you haven't been feeling well for a while and you happen to have breast implants, consider the symptoms. I always start by that when somebody calls the office. Before we have our phone call, and they have a phone call with me before they go in and meet with Dr. Brenner, because now I work for him. And I send them the list of symptoms. I cannot tell you how many women, and women call the office all the time to get a replacement, let's say. And he'll have me sometimes talk to them first. Or let's say they want to take them out. Anyway, but they'll say, oh, and I'm not sick, by the way, with this whole BII thing. And we've gotten to a point now where Dr. Brenner at the beginning would be like, oh, they say that they're not sick, so you don't have to call this particular. And I'll say, no, I want to talk to them. Let me have a conversation. I send them the symptoms. And then by the time we talk, every time they're like, oh my God, I've got 25 of these symptoms.
Well, I really want to speak to that because I feel like having a history in integrative wellness and health coaching, and which has evolved into life coaching and spiritual coaching and energy healing, because that's like the deeper layers of our wellness. But what happens is we get so used to the way we are, like we just assume like, or like, well, I have gut issues, or I have cancer, but my family had cancer. It's like or there's something to fix it. I get migraines all the time. Well, this is a whole nother conversation, but that's an energy block, and like something's out of alignment. But yet if there's something to fix it, which there is something to fix everything, then we don't have to deal with the pain, and we don't have to address the root cause. And what happens is, and I find it interesting that right away they'll say, well, I'm not sick with this. It's almost like, well, now that you've said that, you probably are. But how easily we get used to being sick.
Yeah.
How easily we get used to being uncomfortable. Like I have gut issues and I have a migraine, and I lived in this world. I was a health coach for almost 10 years. And so I was just amazed at like, even just the addiction to the coffee and the wine, just something as simple as that. It's like every day, if it's just like, I have to have this or I can't function, or I have to have this or I can't do this, or there's always something to fix everything. But getting really clear on, how am I really feeling and showing up? And what is it costing me to stay where I'm at?
Right.
It's another great question to ask.
Well, Jen, too, I want to say this because I feel like others can resonate with this who have had a chronic illness. And the way I look at it now, I believe that chronic illness is an opportunity for us to heal spiritually, physically, mentally. And you can take it as far as you want to take it. For me, it's kicked off this beautiful journey. I'll be healing the rest of my life. I always try different modalities. I love it. People don't get this. It's addictive. I mean, I remember being so like in the LA party scene at one point during that time. I was like, I cannot imagine like not going out and going to the nightclubs and dancing on the tables until 7 a.m. Now I'm like, I rarely ever have a drink unless it's a special occasion. I just am in such a, I'm like, oh, I just want to go to Reiki today. I just can't wait to go to acupuncture. But what I kept saying during that whole 7 years, as as commonplace as it was, like saying my name is Amanda, it was I'm sick. I'm sick. And I caught myself after the implants were out and I knew I was getting better. I kept saying, like, I was identifying myself as I identify with being sick. And I caught myself, I said, you must not say that again. You are not sick anymore. Stop. So even women who are in these support groups after they get their implants out, they'll say, I wanted to get out of the support groups because that's keeping me in that space. And I always say, good for you. I think that that's probably a really good idea. You don't need to be in there then anymore.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Just I'm in a place in my life where I've witnessed my father go through many, 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 many health challenges, and it's a very sensitive time for him. And I look at my role as reminding him of who he was for 60 years, not the last 11 years where he's had cancer and heart failure and kidney failure and, all these
Oh,
other
bless
things.
his heart.
And well, thank you. But it is so important. So this is for anybody listening who may be the spouse or the partner or the best friend of somebody who is coming to you and saying, I don't feel well. And
Mm-hmm.
this might be a thing for me. Not only having the compassion for their experience and supporting them and finding out if that is indeed what is going on, but then also not allowing them to be stuck in their identity, either with breast plants or without, either sick
Right.
or it's like because we aren't any of those things anyways, right? We're
Right.
spiritual beings in this human body, and we're not
Yeah.
our emotions, we're not our thoughts, we're not our illness,
Mm-hmm.
we're not any of those things.
Right.
And we're just pure love and grace and God and spirit.
Yes.
And it sounds like, thank you for sharing your journey. It sounds like that it just gave this beautiful gift to you to now work with Dr. Brenner, and you have this brilliant team and you
Mm-hmm.
work with women all over the country. So tell me about the team and what it looks like when they come to you seeking support.
Great. When I exhausted all of my Western medicine, I turned to alternative and I just was blown away with all of these amazing practitioners who are all so talented. Still though, nobody was asking me that question, do you have an implanted medical device? And I really hope that, and I see it changing. I see that on intake forms more. But I thought to myself, what's the saddest part in this whole story is that the average person never gets to explore alternative medicine. They usually keep within the Western medicine confines because of their insurance, right? And they're busy just trying to put food on the table and take care of their families. And I thought, I want to start introducing these alternative care providers just in case maybe somebody thinks, maybe that would work for me if I did acupuncture or Reiki. So right after my explant, I went into hair restoration. I refused to ever sell another breast implant again. For me, that just would not work with my integrity. And so I thought, what am I going to do? Did hair restoration. And after about 6 months, Dr. Brenner said, I'm seeing so many women. I was sending him so many patients. Would you like to handhold these women through their explant? Because I just can't imagine what they're going through. Because he's so lovely and he is acknowledging women and listening to them. And I said, you better believe it. Like that would be my dream. So I became a patient advocate, which I think is so important that people know that there are advocates out there that you can look into who will support you. And so I said, but if I'm going to work for you, we have to have a holistic breast team because I just find that that's essential. And even if patients decide not to use them because they say I've already found a functional medicine doctor, et cetera, because many of them have, right? Because they were on the same journey as I was. That's okay. I'm setting an example for others to emulate because the more help and support we have, I hope that they create these everywhere. Great. That's
Me too.
more help for people. And he said, okay, if that's what you think they need. He said, I don't know anything about detox, right? Because he's Western. He said, I've never detoxed myself. I said, I get it. And he said, and just as long as they don't like confuse it, like I'm a Western medicine, I'm a plastic surgeon. I'm not a holistic plastic surgeon. And I said, you know what? You can thank me later. Okay. Because holistic medicine is the future. And so he doesn't even, that's the beauty of it. He's just doing the right thing. He doesn't even know like what he's got coming
It's
because
aligned. It sounds like it's just aligned with his values as a person.
yeah,
And you've done a beautiful job of creating a team that can speak the language to a different way of healing, which is the future. And it just to kind of circle all the way back
okay.
this conversation, what I find is so interesting is, integrative and holistic healing and I don't want to say medicine. We'll just say holistic healing, holistic practices are very patient centered,
Mhm.
and and I also want to say like not everybody will have the same symptoms or the same story that you did.
No,
Like you said, the 36-year-old had dementia. Like I there it might be affecting you in some other
correct.
way. Allergies, chronically ill, thyroid dysfunction, like cancer. I mean, there's so many different types and layers of autoimmunity based on our genetic predisposition that everybody will have a different experience, based on kind of like where your weak points are. And
Yeah.
let's also bring light to the fact that our emotional imprinting has an effect on our body as well. There are certain emotions associated with different organs in our body, and then we have a genetic karmic imprint. There's all kinds of factors in this. And so holistic wellness is patient centered, and it supports you in trusting your own body. It supports you in the getting the care that you need based on your unique needs. And so it sounds like Dr. Brenner is aligned to that, like just treating the patient for whatever they need.
Mhm.
And there is a little bit of, I don't even like to call it alternative because that makes it sound like it's a different type of healing, but it's really like a holistic approach. It's just giving the person what they need based on their symptoms.
Yeah, I mean, we can't do the surgery. He has to do the surgery. We can't do that for
Yeah.
him. And he relies on us and passes the patient on, and they can take advantage of our services as much as little as they need. And so we just all work as a team, and it's working out because I will tell you, I can't think of one patient. Someone just asked me the other day, because I have a very large account on Instagram that I have followed by women all over the world and the country, the holistic beauty coach. And so I hear from all of them, and they'll say, oh, I had a great experience with my explant surgeon, but I'm not better,
Mm.
right? But our patients, we've talked about this all the time. I can't think of one that is not either has a complete turnaround and resolve of all their symptoms, or at least a majority, or had resolved ones that came up as a result of the breast implants. Maybe if they had, say, like Hashimoto's before,
Mhm.
that takes a lot of work, autoimmune, maybe that doesn't always resolve. And we don't ever say we can guarantee. I make sure I say we cannot guarantee that this is going to be your answer. But if you're at the point that you've explored all these other options, you're not getting any other diagnoses that make sense, nothing's getting better, things are getting worse, you have implants, you have a number of the symptoms on the symptom list, then that's at the point where you just try to start thinking about, like, maybe I should remove my implants. That's all.
So who do you have that's a part of your holistic team?
We have two naturopathic doctors, one that is well versed in helping women with mold sensitivities and
Mm.
detox. And I knew that was important because we'll hear often that women with saline implants, if they live in an environment that has mold, they've had a tendency to have mold in their chests,
Oh, wow.
which is very difficult to detox from. My other naturopath, Dr. Nikki Gill, she's amazing at healing your gut. And I tell all the women, your body's it wants to return to homeostasis, and a lot of things will just kind of heal on their own. But I would recommend that healing your gut, balancing your hormones are two things that you must work with a practitioner to do, and you'll never regret it. I feel like every human needs to heal their gut.
100%.
A woman who offers sonograms instead of mammograms because they have no radiation and they can detect lesions sometimes smaller than the mammogram can. We have a woman who does medical tattooing, Ruth Swissa, who can even create areolas for women who have had double mastectomies. And she's lovely, so for scarring. But Dr. Brenner, his work is so perfectionistic. He's a Virgo.
Me too.
I don't even see my scars. And so that's for a lot of women who say like, well, I could never do this, get an explant and a lift because I don't want to see scars. I don't even see mine. Who am I missing? Oh, and then
spiritual coach.
A spiritual coach is Sarah Ann Stewart. She's amazing. She had BII herself. So if anyone wants to speak to her ahead of time, I end up speaking to all of the women a lot though, and kind of just getting them prepped for surgery. And then we have Leah Joyner, who's amazing. She's a colonic hydrotherapist and colonic so important for detoxing. Oh yeah. So, and that's how I found out about, right?
That's right. That was the original.
Yeah.
So. I love how, I just love seeing the cycles. I love seeing the synchronicities. And, you know, what I noticed from hearing your story is, I think what I want to just personally encourage the listeners to just do is just to take the intention to connect with your body and your intuition and to God, and know that if something feels off, don't let anybody tell you that it's not.
Correct.
And because and my listeners know, like, that was my whole journey with my health and the health of my daughter, and going completely holistic after a long path of illness as well. And they've heard me say that message over and over again. And we, Amanda and I both want to say that we know that might not be easy. And we know that it might be scary. And we know that there may be a fear of even just the realization that maybe you are suffering from breast implant illness. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't, but there are people here to support you.
Yes, that's what I'd like to drive home more than anything. I didn't have any support because we weren't talking about it then, and I didn't have the right avenues, I guess, to probably ask for help. But I just wanted to make sure that no other woman feels alone like I did. And so that's what I'd like to drive home. There are so many people now who are acknowledging it, who understand it, who can help, and who care. And we want to advocate for you. Dr. Brenner's a great advocate for our patients. He connects them with other specialists and so forth. He talks to all of the specialists that a woman is seeing and checks off, makes sure that they know that she's planning to explant. And all of these doctors now are waking up too, and they're starting to support and say, good for you. I've had other patients who have done this and it's worked out. And it's really so beautiful. I feel so fortunate to be a part of this. And so it's going to be
a movement for sure. It's an elevated kind of consciousness in our humanity. It's a movement to heal, which we're all doing. And you know, I'm really hearing like a lot of trust and acceptance in the whole process that goes on the spiritual level at this.
We could keep talking about this, and let's talk about holistic beauty next time. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to talk.
Yes, well, I'd like to drop some links for the listeners. You have some links with holistic beauty products, and maybe even non-toxic living, whatever you have. We're going to put some links in there because they want to hear about this.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, I still have more questions on the holistic beauty thing
I'm
too.
even creating with a friend of mine who's a longtime esthetician who got me into holistic skincare years ago. A skincare line she's creating with frequency added to it.
Yes, one of my practitioners here does that. It's an energetic. She like spins it and puts it on this machine, and it's amazing. If we can facilitate the natural healing that's already in our body. Like, that'd be pretty awesome. So
Very
thank you
awesome.
so much, Amanda, for
Thank
your
you,
time
Jen.
and for sharing about the holistic breast team. I think it's wonderful. Thank you for the listeners that stayed to listen to all this. Anybody who's listening who knows somebody, and I live in Florida, so plastic surgery in Florida is probably as maybe not quite as high as LA County, but it's still pretty high because we're at the
Oh,
beach
it's
all the time.
high. It's high.
So for all the listeners, wherever you are, I feel like it's a little bit more prominent in warmer tropical places, but
Mhm.
wherever you are, if you know anybody, please share this with them. Please be willing to listen to what they're experiencing. And because as I hear, it might not be the easiest thing to hear right away, but just be there for that person, be
Yeah.
there to support them. And that Amanda and Dr. Brenner, and there are people that are seeing this and waking up to this. And I have the feeling it's going to happen a lot more. Just from my
Mm.
personal experience, I've seen the 7 to 10 year cycle where the women start to really notice adverse effects from that.
Mhm.
But just to know that there are resources available, and there's a whole community of women supporting each other through the healing process afterwards. You don't have to do this alone.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe somebody will write a book on it.
Hey, anything's possible. We're working on a
Anything's possible.
documentary. I mean, anything is possible.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for listeners. Thank you for being here. And to my listeners, I will see you next week. Aloha.
Aloha.